There's a million different doctors. There are a million different protocols, medicines, surgery. That should give people hope. Just because it didn't work one time doesn't mean that the next time won't work.
I met you in 2015 and you hadn't had a period in like 6 months or something.
Yes.
And so we worked together. We did 4 treatments and the period came back.
Yep.
And I didn't see you for 3 years. You came back, you were married. It was 2018. And you told me, oh no, the period totally regulated itself. It never stopped again.
Yeah. Whatever you did in those 4 treatments, it just fixed it. My OB, because I was going a few times to try to figure out where it went. And he was like, you know what? Just go to Danica and let's see what happens. And I came to you and 4 treatments later, it worked. Whatever magic you did.
So you know what magic we did? We did some grief recovery. We looked over some past relationship and some unfulfilled, or at that time, like looking back and feeling into, wow, I thought my life would be different. And at the time, we reconciled that. We didn't think that then you were going to go on this trajectory of, wow, I really thought my life was going to be different.
I know, so much changed. And especially over those next 3 years, so much changed. And
You
I met
got
Todd
married.
and got married and then started thinking about family.
Yeah. When you came back in, it was kind of like, I just want to keep my period regular. I just want to keep stress down. And it wasn't like, hey, I'm ready to get back in, or hey, I'm going to start into IVF. But the signs were there of, you probably have endo. And I don't know, I feel like I mentioned it.
You mentioned it very early on because I'll always remember it. And I hated that you mentioned it because I was like, this is no. I remember just vehemently being like, no, I do not want surgery. Because, we talked about it being endo and you're like, really the only way to get a true handle on it, the gold standard to fix it, is surgery. And to me, that surgery seemed, really scary at the time. So I just remember blocking that out. And it's one of the regrets I have over my journey that at that moment, I wasn't as scared. I somehow went and got a surgery. Again, everything has to fall in place to actually to get to that point. But man, I would have saved myself years. Years.
Yes.
Over that. I remember you sitting on the edge of the table and I was like, no.
Yeah, it's in the notes.
Yes.
I said distinct fear of surgery and it kind of pulled back because it's not my job to push, it's my job to present and then what you do with it. And, then we trust the process. But it was really like, I could say so many different things. First, I want to say you're an Olympic athlete. And so that's one of the main reasons I wanted you to be on the show, because for you to be so healthy, so health conscious, so adept at moving a muscle, or so aware of there's 3 pounds of weight gain and that's going to affect my landing, those kinds of things, it kind of set in the back of my mind, oh, this could end up being a fertility case because of the mental attachment to how things need to be because of your training, your athletic upbringing. It's like you're going to go and practice at 5 a.m. or something. And you loved it, but it was very regimented and all based on being able to control things. So I sort of was like, okay, well, her body responded really quickly to acupuncture, got her period back, and you were young, so the genetics would be good.
Right.
And it just seemed like the most logical thing.
Right.
But it wasn't.
It wasn't. It wasn't. We thought it was going to be a slam dunk. And I remember coming in to see you because I had originally wanted to try IVF because I had a friend who went through a journey very young in her 20s. And she was just early 30s at this point and went through years of, miscarriage and fertility issues. And I realized that there could be problems, when it comes to knowing exactly where your fertility falls on this very large spectrum. And I just didn't know enough about anything to do with getting pregnant, staying pregnant, really just a lot about my reproductive system. I just thought, oh, when it's time to get pregnant, that's what people do. They just get pregnant. Like
Right.
it will work. And I realized that it's, when I talked to her, I realized, wow, like this could be a harder journey than I thought. And I was still young, but I was in my mid 30s. And I just thought, let's check it out. Let's go to IVF, put some embryos on ice. I felt really lucky that I had the resources to have that option. And knowing my job, my career, travel, all of those things, it felt like the right choice. And we started, and the cycle was going great. I had a great number of eggs to start with. We had, I think, gosh, I know all the stats. I think we had, 7 day 5 or day 6 embryos, which is a great outcome.
That's a good starting point.
Right.
But then it was zero
And
normals.
then 0 normals,
Right.
which was just the biggest shock. And I just never thought that was going to happen, because then it just really scared me. It made me wonder.
That was the starting point for fertility PTSD.
Yes.
Which is a real thing.
Yes. No, it is.
It for real is. So that was also like, oh, gosh, remember you had explained to me early on in treatment, you said, I have genuine hypochondria and I will take anything and look it over and obsess over it. So I noted that too, and was like, I'll be very careful at how I present things. But then with these abnormal embryos, it was sort of like, well, was that first IVF protocol something went awry, or was it that it's time to do like seed program, diet changes and stuff?
Well, yeah. I mean, I take things on like 200%. So when something goes wrong, I just felt like I had to figure out the answer. And it's funny, health anxiety for me, my whole life, I think, really stemmed from being an athlete and getting an injury and worrying about how that injury would affect my career or just training, or would I miss a competition. And it's so funny now. I feel like my fertility journey really, cleaned up my health anxiety, because I went through so much. It was, 24 surgeries. I faced so many fears. And now I just have a completely different outlook. But at the start of this, I think all of those, thoughts of why, like, yes, and I was working with Dr. Beck, an incredible doctor, and she was not alarmed. And she's like, I've looked, we're looking at so many different signs when we do this egg retrieval. We're looking at your egg quality. We're looking at, all these different things that can kind of let me tell you that I think it's going to be okay. I think you'll be able to make genetically normal embryos. But she said, I do think all of our data that we've collected from this retrieval, it points to endometriosis. And that's when we were going to change the protocol. But for me and you, I really wasn't even focused on that. I was just focused on the why and this scariness of what if I can just never get a genetically normal embryo.
Yeah. And so my strength is in talking women off the ledge, keeping them calm, down-regulating the nervous system. And I'm envisioning, as we look back, Dr. Beck then at that point would have been thinking like her Olympic athlete mind of, we need to tweak. And that's where she started kind of thinking on the number of millimeters to trigger. So she started, like what could she control? It would be like trigger earlier, maybe change some medications, and then to have the conversation about what causes egg quality to go down. And the most obvious is endometriosis as pelvic inflammation. Right. So then you come back to me with that conversation, and I'm working on a doctorate at that point in 2018, and I had created a clinical intervention for women doing IVF. So we created, this is backstory you don't know, but my web team went and created a duplicate copy of the SEED clinical trial website, and we called it SEED Special Access, so that if I had patients that I wanted them just to have the quickest pathway, because you're busy with live TV and still doing some skating and different things. So I didn't want to like overwhelm you. And also you were still young. So I thought, if I give you this infertility, access to an infertility course because you hadn't really been proven infertile. You hadn't ever tried.
No,
So
never tried.
So,
we never tried to get pregnant.
Right. So we called the website Seed Special Access, and we gave you access to that. Do you remember doing that?
Oh my gosh, yes. It was because I was truthfully, that first retrieval was one of those defining moments in the journey where, of course, when later on my story gets so crazy that was nothing, but because it was the first big thing that went wrong, I think it had such an impact on me, and I was so fearful and scared. So for those 2 months while I waited to do, because we jumped right into another cycle, but it takes about 2 months, and especially the way that Dr. Beck does my protocol, and I was just really anxiety ridden, and this program helped me so much stay present, stay calm, and it gave me control because, again, as an athlete and just with my personality, I love to have control. I can't always have control, but at least I had control over the way I thought every day, the foods I ate, just sort of having this sense of hope in a way that I was able to contribute.
Yeah. And it was like, well, if I remember to do this and that, and she has this working for other people, then this is going to make a change. And we also, I loved in the unexpected episode where you talked about our time together, you said, I'm not an acupuncture goer.
Yeah.
Meaning like, I'm not a meditative,
no, we're like
spiritual
very
foo-foo.
opposite in some ways, but so completely the
we
same
even had
in
the
others.
left side pain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So it was like, I knew what you meant, and I saw it in there. So I always put,
in the seed program, it was like, remember how I rebelled? It was like raw milk and egg smoothies, and you would be so kind of like, if you can, and I like wanted to commit fully to the program, but I was like so against some of these things because they're just not things that I would do.
Yet an athlete would have a raw egg in their smoothie and not think anything of it, and athletes may avoid regular dairy. So it kind of fit. Did you ever drink that?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it was
not at first, or you just
so it was like, I think I probably went like a week and didn't. And then I did. And I did it a couple times the first round. If I'm being completely honest, the other rounds that I did seed, I would omit that part
because that's what you didn't like. But you had the eggs and you had the mindset.
Everything. I really enjoyed it too. And even if I didn't follow it, specifically, like I did the very first round, I journaled. I listened to I loved your meditations. They kept me so calm. I journaled every day. I didn't miss a day. I was so dedicated. It was like my training for the next retrieval.
Yeah. I was shocked and at the same time not at all, because you are an athlete. And I thought, okay, of course she's following it to the letter. But I'm also thinking, you're a busy woman here in LA and with a celebrity. So like, how are you going to find the time?
I did it, and I was traveling while I was doing it. I followed it to a T, but my point was that I did 8 retrievals. So, at a certain point for different times of my journey, I had different outlooks, and I wouldn't, follow, sometimes we want to do acupuncture and you'd be like, it's okay this time. Like, don't, we had our peaks and our highs and our lows of how we just flowed with the journey, but the food stayed with me, and it still stays with me to this day. It stayed with me throughout all of that. So even if I wasn't following a specific diet, I always was kind of eating the seed program, like my chia seeds and things, my berries, my nut mix, the
trail mix.
With the trail mix. Mm-hmm. There were so many things that I kept.
Well, and a good thing you jumped on the diet, because I was shocked when I went back in and looked at your chart to see you were drinking Diet Cokes.
Oh, yeah, I know. And now I had one on the way here. Ever since Georgie was born, I've really
on the Diet Cokes.
I've really loosened everything up again.
Yeah. Well, you have your embryos
I know.
And the whole thing. Yep. And you are like, how is it going? I don't know if we jump ahead of the timeline, but she's so precious.
I know. And you got to see her the other day. She's just the best. And I think this is just, I'm settling into motherhood. It's hard, but again, nothing can be as hard as my fertility journey for me. Everyone has different things they can deal with, and I got through it and I dealt with it, but it was traumatic. It's something that I think I'll always, be healing from in certain ways, but it feels like I've been reborn in a way. Georgie was born and somehow I was born again too, because I have my life back in such a different way.
Right. Right. So remember a couple times I said, I think you're going to do this and it's going to serve a higher purpose, and you're going to use your celebrity to help other women. And while I was saying that, and I know that is true, I was sad that I had to say that it would have to be hard for you to need to use your platform.
I know. I remember you saying that so often, and I would be like, "Ugh, I know."
Yeah, and you were like, "No, I don't know. I don't know." But you have, and my patients are listening, and they are benefiting, and they're waiting for next episodes and stuff.
It's been great. It's been great to share. I mean, when we start, our podcast is Unexpecting, and my husband and I do it together, and we just really wanted to document our journey, I think, just because it was so much to wrap our minds around. And we got to a very hopeful place where then we could speak openly about it. And we never expected to sort of create this community. And it's just been so fun to have these conversations and to really be vulnerable, and also to see, hear and see Todd's perspective. And just, I think it's good for our marriage. We're kind of going back and closing up and tying little bows on all of these parts of the journey that were really hard, that I think we kind of swept under the rug just to get through.
Yeah. And so, to speak on that, I work with the women most of the time, the intimate details. Right. And the men, they don't really have somebody to talk to about it. So when I listen to Unexpecting, I am loving that part of it.
Yeah.
And
it surprises me, things he says, because I just never knew.
Right. And it feels so much only happening to the woman. That's understandable, but it's not accurate. They are really going through it.
Yeah, they're going through it too. I mean, the women really take the brunt of it, I will say.
Right. So with respect to the fertile foods, they go in 4 phases, right? So special foods when you're bleeding, those are like the greens to cleanse and help slough the lining and to bring down the unopposed estrogen load. And that would be especially helpful for you having endometriosis. And so that was something that
the green juices,
the green juice,
the broccolini.
Yes, I do always know when the women are doing the seed program, because when they come into the office, they have a greens too, fresh juice.
Yes,
So that was you. And then the phase 2 pre-ovulatory, or while you're doing ovarian stem, it's good fats, minerals, things that look like eggs.
What was it was not regular yogurt, but I bought it so many times. How do I forget?
Oh, it's coconut yogurt.
Coconut yogurt, yeah. And coconut yogurt with the pomegranate seeds, and
special foods. And it's something that if you continue to use that, you're going to continue to have regular periods.
Well, I think also, for people that are listening that aren't, like I said in my own podcast, that I wasn't an acupuncture goer to begin with. I'm and you know that about me. I mean, I grew up as an athlete. I popped 3 Advils every day, which is not healthy when I was, training. But I really believed in, I got a hip surgery at 19 and it fixed what needed to be fixed. And I'm kind of like Western medicine, just take the medicine, get the surgery, do the thing. And it's always hard, it was hard for me to really soften and try something new, because I was like, what foods are going to change this or change that? Or, it just was my personality. And I think, though, that even if you're someone who is like that, you don't realize the other parts of following this program that I think benefited me even maybe more than what was benefiting me from eating the food. It was just like envisioning like a lot of your foods, and you talk about that, but there's like a lot of like eggs, like all of these things you would talk about how they're fertile foods, and you sort of like see the food as fertile. You feel like it's, fertile as you're eating it. And it just is this mindset that gives you just a little more optimism. It makes you feel more feminine, more fertile, all of these things, which again, who knows what that does for a result in a specific form, but it really helps you, like regardless of anything else, it helps you tackle IVF in a different way. At least it did for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think everybody who's coming on here is saying the same kind of thing, because it's food as fertile medicine.
Right.
And foods can really take us down. Foods might be at the root of endometriosis or at least exacerbation of the symptoms. So it stood to reason, but given that there was that layer of pelvic inflammation, it needed to be addressed.
It did, yes.
Right?
But we did get great results. I mean, good enough results the second retrieval after I did this program. Don't you remember?
I do, yeah.
I got 2 normals.
That's when,
two
the
out
boy
of
girl.
3. Yeah, 2 out of 3 normals, which was just like a huge relief.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, that was then kind of over the hump.
Like the first hump.
Right. Yeah. And then the rest is all in unexpected.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do want to go back, because when we were working together on this, you would say, what else can I eat? And I'd be like, hold on, you have all the foods. This is spirit of a mother unfolding. This is you going from the girl to the woman to the mother. This is this important work for you. Being Gemini and tiny, I have the same issue. We have that reversed astrological chart where it's like the girl, woman, and the two do get to coexist, and that's the mother. Right. And so to be talking about spirit of a mother, it was like, well, what does that mean? There were so many different parts of it, but it was like, look how you're nurturing Dubby when he had to have his leg amputated, and he had his cancer.
I had a dog that had cancer, had to make the decision, and wanted to make the right one for him, but he lived for another 1.5 2 years. So happy on 3 legs, swimming, jumping, playing in the snow.
Playing with his baby brother.
Yes, playing with,
Yeah. So it was fun for me because I really got to watch you grow up.
Yeah, I really did grow up. Over these years, I grew up more in, my mid to late 30s than I did at any other point in my life.
Yeah, it was really special.
Really was. And I tapped into, and you worked with me on this, but just really tapping into a more vulnerable, feminine, like letting go, to the point where I think there were times where like eventually at the end you're like, wow, you really mastered it. You're like really letting it go. Like, I think sometimes you were like, maybe get some of that back. But I had just, I hit such a rock bottom low. I started to.
Yeah. So I was remembering one of the miscarriages. I was like, let's Zoom record. And you said yes. And like, we're not going to talk about that, but it really showed how you were able to reframe. We're not talking about it because it's in your podcast and it's your story, but you were there on a Zoom camera, and it was like, is it working? Is it not working? Here's the scores and the numbers are up. Yesterday they were down. Like it was this whole thing. But I remember sitting there with you for an hour, and the stuff that you said, I know you and Todd have watched the video more recently than me probably, but it was just so heartbroken open moment. For you and for me. And I really felt like, dang, just how well you were able to talk about the process for you.
Yeah, it was hard. The first miscarriage, that was my first miscarriage, and that was the hardest. Well, the fourth was the hardest, but the first was, it's just so shocking. And when you never experience pregnancy loss, you just obviously don't know what to expect. And, for so long, you probably think about, you're going through IVF, you're starting a transfer. There's a possibility that you could have a miscarriage, and you see so many women have them. And I think I always thought like, oh, that sounds awful. Like, I'll get through it. It's going to be awful. But I didn't realize how awful and how it just tapped into feelings I had never felt. Like, I err on the side of being like a worrywart, anxious. I am not I really have never dealt with depression or feeling depressed. And that was the first time I think I had feelings of, at first I didn't know what they were, because I was like, because I never experienced it. and I was like, Todd, I don't want to go take a shower today. Like, I don't want to get out of bed today, and he's like, ooh, you're feeling depressed. And I'm like, no, I don't get depressed. And I realized actually I was, for the first time in my life, really feeling, also, so low and not knowing how to deal with it.
Yeah. So when we did the Zoom, I think you had a couple of losses. And
Oh,
then,
was it?
yeah. And I said, I think we need to record this because it was the in between. It wasn't clear that it was going to go away.
Danica, I think you should look. I think there's 2 we did.
Well, we did endometriosis and we did Zoom about this miscarriage, but maybe there's another one. I mean,
like
we have
there was
talked
one.
so much.
I feel like I remember being in, literally talking about getting out of my bed. I didn't get out of my bed, and I did it from my bed. And
yeah.
And anyways.
Right. And
Boy.
It was just so like, oh.
It's just like, talking about miscarriage and pregnancy loss was so different, than anything else we had sort of confronted at the time. Obviously, IVF and failures in IVF are difficult, but we had, been working together, close to a year at that point, fully on IVF. And it just was this different, heartbreaking, moment that we had to get through together. And I think that, I look back, and that's why I've said it on my podcast, just like how much I appreciated you in that moment. Because, you were never just my acupuncturist somehow. And obviously we're friends, but you do so much more than just, stick someone with needles.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's a different way of making them cry. That's through conversation where we can take the tears and transform them from pain into joy. And I think the Zoom I'm thinking of was when you were surrendering it. Like
I definitely got to that point. I never thought I would, but I really got to a point of surrender.
Yeah. And we captured it on video. It was like you really releasing the need to know, was the stick going to darken or not? Yeah. You had just like let it go.
Yep.
And I thought maybe that will turn it around and it will come back. It was just like, I wanted it so badly for you, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I know you did. I feel like we both did. I mean, it was just, you think about over the 5 years, just how many transfers I did, and every transfer coming to you the morning of, and the talks we'd have and the hope we'd have. And I mean, you're part of it too. So it had to affect you when I would be like, another miscarriage. It was just mind numbing at a certain point.
Yeah. Yeah, it just was beyond unfair, and I was running out of things to say, which hardly ever happens. So
right, I know.
But knowing Georgie, knowing how she got here, seeing how strong she is, watching you to be able to meet her strength. That was something I noticed yesterday when we had breakfast. Here she is in her playpen, and she's like doing planks and things.
She's like a little bodybuilder.
She really is. But you're able to position her and stuff where when I had my kids, I was tired. I was weakened. I was in recovery from C-section and stuff. So you're able to meet her where she needs you to be.
Yeah.
So really there are these ways of reframing what's happened.
Yeah. And it's like, it's interesting to just think of, how I've changed, and it's just life. And it's a big thing to think about, because I think people, face these fears that they think they'll never get through, or they'll never be able to change their perspective or outlook. And I just have such a different outlook on that now, because I was one of those people that just thought, I'm pretty stubborn. This is how I feel, that's not going to change. And I just realized, like, holy cow, I completely changed over these 5 years, from the point where, I was thinking you were crazy if you ever thought I was going to do an endometriosis surgery, to the point where now I've had 2. And I'm at the point where you don't take endo surgery lightly, but I would go in tomorrow, have a glass of wine tonight, not think twice about it, show up relaxed, trusting, and have another one. So the fact that I went from that to this, the fact that I went from, I don't, want a surrogate, or I don't see a surrogate in my future, to the point where we've had so many conversations over the summer, when I thought I was going to, because originally the plan was to get a surrogate, but then try again when we found this immune issue between Todd and I. And I was like, Danica, I don't think I want to be pregnant. I'm having all these feelings around that. So to go from the point where I would have like literally chopped off all my fingers if they said you could be pregnant today. And then I'm at the point where now I'm like, I really am so traumatized by the experience. And I also had such an incredible experience of surrogacy that I don't know if I see or even want to try to be pregnant.
Right. Yeah. I think
it's interesting.
Well, so if the uterus is a second heart, that's one of the many metaphors inside the SEED program. This experience has, whether it's through mothering Georgie now or that relationship you had with Michaela, your second heart and your first heart, they are in alignment now, and in a way that would make you more available to your marriage and your relationships and your daughter.
Well, I think it also, everything I went through for 5 years, and I'm sure people experience this, fertility isn't the worst thing because you think of people that are going through cancer diagnosis and, long-term illness. And it's different because, again, I always say that I'm so grateful for my health, and I know that so many people experience what I have experienced. It's not unique to me, but you do realize that I bet people that go through, because it's still under the umbrella of medicine, you go through these medical, diagnosis. You go through a medical diagnosis where your life has changed for 5 years or for however long it may be. And you realize that maybe your outlook changes because you really do open yourself up to this whole new world, this whole new perspective on life of what's important, right? Like what's really important. I'm not saying I'm enlightened in any way, but I'm just saying it forced me to get to this point, even though I didn't want to be forced to do it. But it's like when I think about, trying to get pregnant again or having to take these immune drugs that who knows what response I'll have to them or long-term effects I could have from that, whatever it is. I just now am prioritizing life and living life and loving my husband and loving my daughter and enjoying life instead of wasting precious time because I want something a certain way.
So we have that in common, you and I. I'm not sure if you remember, but I was diagnosed and had 6 years of recovering my own fertility in secret with an acupuncturist that was in my office at the time.
Right. All while you were seeing women going through
and cheerleading other women and not talking about it because I didn't know if it was going to improve or change. But the way that I learned to think about things differently, if I could manifest the opportunity to try. And that is how Kira and Jack are here because I opened my mind and I opened my heart. And I got over myself of how I thought it should be.
How I thought it should be. And, I think I even wasted too much time in my own journey looking back, which is fine. I think I had to do it to get to this point. But I'm sort of like, goodness, at miscarriage 2 or 3, like I could have shortened this.
Except that if you had, I don't know which girl embryo Georgie is. She's not one of the first girls.
She's my last retrieval at 40 years old because I lost so many girls.
Girl embryos,
so I kept losing girls. I lost 5 girls. And so
look how strong she is.
I know. I know. She was like, you're having me.
Don't worry, Mom. So, the fact that she was in the last retrieval, I tell this
out of 8.
Out of 8 retrievals, she came through there. I tell this to the women that they can become more fertile over time. And they really have resistance to that. But you are living proof of that.
Yeah, my retrievals got better. I started at 35, 36. And by the time I was 40, I was like nailing it.
You were sticking the landing.
I was sticking
triple
the landing.
Lutz.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is really, I think, like foods at first, and then the mindsets and the shifts and the maturity and the wisdom, such that who Georgie is and the personal strength that she is made of is because she came from that egg that was at the end that was sticking it.
I know.
which is really a cool thing
Yeah.
to think about. And if you're somebody listening and you're going over this and you're going through it and through it and through it, like the more that we can open our minds and our hearts and entertain ideas like this, the energy is going to follow the thoughts.
Yeah.
And
I
we'll
think
create
also,
that.
you know, a big thing for me in my journey was understanding what I was going through. And it took me a while to, I did a lot of research, and not everyone wants to do that. And that's, their choice. But I would say the more you learn, the more that maybe you will find that hope. Because in the beginning, when I got 7 abnormal embryos, I thought, well, everyone just does this one. Like, this is my answer. Like, what would be different? But you just, after being in IVF for 5 years, I realized there's a million different doctors. There are a million different protocols, medicines, there's surgery, there's, if you have endo, if you have fibroids, whatever it is, there's so many, unfortunately, so many different things you have to check off your list. But that should give people hope that just because it didn't work one time doesn't mean that the next time won't work.
Right. Exactly. You know what inspired me? And I kept telling you this, and I don't think that it really meant as much to you as it did to me.
What?
I had that random dream that we were at Cedars.
Yes.
And that they all said, okay, she's here.
Yeah,
she made it.
This.
And it was so lifelike.
And it was a girl.
It was
and I kept, at times when you would tell me this, because we had some boy embryos on ice, and then we'd have to do more retrievals just because we wanted to, I was losing so many, we always wanted to ensure that I wasn't going to just have 1 embryo or 2 embryos left, because my odds were really poor. And, I lost so many girls that there was a hope that I really could have that rainbow baby come back to me. But I mean, I was getting such poor results that when you would tell me about this dream, I'd be like, Danica, like, there's no, there's no girl coming. There's no girl coming.
And it must have been, it was before you met Michaela or had that idea. It was like
I think
a
it was like
winter
the middle
time
of the journey. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it woke me. It was like the dream I had with Joyce Vargas saying, there's something you're going to have to do, go to CFP and they will help you do it. And you won't want to try because it's big and you're anxious. Right. But that was the SEED program. Right. So like, who acts on a dream? But when I had
you
that,
do, Danica.
Yeah, me. So I had that dream and I had really seen it, and it felt like it it wasn't you in the delivery room. It was, she's coming in from like a light beam or something. And there were skylights, and I don't know if there are skylights in the VIP room of Cedars.
I don't even know. I don't even remember.
But it was like, she's coming in and like, here she is, and she makes it. And I was on cloud 9 with that for seriously like 3 months.
I know.
And I used it, and I was like, with some of my really hard cases, because like we take it to your patio and the quarantine and my sabbatical. So I finished the doctorate. I went on sabbatical, and then I was emotionally exhausted and my personal life took a dive, and I just needed to stop. But I treated you and Aaron Foster, and it was just the 2 of you, but the 2 of you kept me so busy.
Yes, I do.
Right. And so when I had that dream about you, I just felt like, okay, I can keep doing this. I can keep encouraging women to believe and to listen and to move forward.
Yep. It's really interesting thinking back to all those times of just, really you've seen me at my most vulnerable and most honest. And I think that's why our connection and relationship is so special, because, again, and it was so for so long, but goodness, I remember in the pandemic, you coming in that back little patio area, us sitting there, Debbie running around,
double masking, slowly tearing my clothes.
And then me sitting on like a really uncomfortable,
we're both like no back support. We're sitting there,
and it was cold some days, and just had like all the blankets on, doing the needles, and just, it was really the lowest point in my life those years. But at least, like I said, the silver lining was finding you out of it.
Yeah. And you gave me something to do besides just focus on my own personal problems. So that was
really
good too.
Going through things together.
Yeah. Well, luckily, I feel like we are through those things, but
I don't know
dang
what
it.
what was going on those years.
Yeah,
But
right. Well,
I also remember when you came in after that first miscarriage, you're always so honest with me. And I always love when you'll like look at a chart or again, this is not who I am. I'm not a chart seeking person, but I now love it because of you. And I always want to know all these things. And I remember you're like, oh, I see it like in 4 years.
I know,
And I was like,
said that.
You remember that about
Yes.
like,
Yes.
I was like, what do you mean 4 years that I'll have my family? Like, are you out of your mind? And I was like, she got it wrong.
She got it wrong. Yeah. But it was like, it showed some transit was going on that was going to be like 3.5 years. And I was kind of like, crap. But I reframed and I was like, that just means that's the time you're going to spend building your family,
right.
Which is like, but when you're approaching that, it seems like forever. And now really it's been like 5 years since I said that, and she is here, and like you're figuring out your next steps. But that was what that time was in your life, and it showed up in your astrological chart.
Yep.
I wanted to say, it's kind of a silly joke, but you deserve an honorary RE credentialing with all that research and everything that you were doing.
I know.
And
I really became
the protocols
obsessed with it. Yep.
And
I like
the
knew
testing.
all of it. Yep. I could read my ultrasounds.
Yeah, but it's good because now with Unexpecting, you're helping.
And just the community I built through Unexpecting. There's so many women that ask questions that I'm not a doctor, but I do, feel comfortable always saying the basic stuff that I know, is just common knowledge with things that could make them feel a little less anxious that day or just need someone to talk to. And that's been really wonderful.
Or to have their next steps fall into their ears,
right.
Or a plan
even
B
knowing
or something.
About
Receptiva DX.
Right. Testing and what to ask your doctor and what possible things could have gone wrong that you want to address or know about or make sure that you're testing for.
With respect to picking Michaela and choosing a surrogate, could you share how did you find such a good match for you? What was it? And intuitively, what was it about her?
I think I just pick up on like people's energy in the moment. And in my mind, it's like Todd and I always say it, like when, we met each other and got married, we just kind of knew. We always say it, like, you were my person. You were just my type of person. And I knew the first time I talked to Michaela, she just seemed like my type of person, like a little, very type A, like me, just like attention to detail, but compassionate and just, so open to also wanting to have an experience through this for herself. So it wasn't just like a job, it really was like we were matching in this way of what she wanted to get out of it, what I wanted to get out of it. She had done surrogacies before, but they were international. There was a language barrier. She really had wanted a bigger family. The reason why she was doing this was because, that was sort of the compromise her and her husband made. She loved being pregnant and obviously being able to do this for people that couldn't. So, she was really excited that I wanted her to be, completely involved and us to communicate over text almost every day. So we created this really beautiful relationship, and she was able to really heal so many things in me. She was my perfect surrogate because I was so nervous for this, this was do or die because we had gone through everything. I finally made the decision to give up on my body and just pray that these embryos would work in someone else.
Well, being so controlling or type A, whatever you want to call it, then to let somebody else carry the precious girl embryo that you had worked like 8 retrievals for.
Right. And I think that was like a hard step, but I immediately just we built this trust, and it was like, you just knew she knew me. So she would text and be like, is there it's getting warm out. Is there a sunscreen that you approve of, so she I didn't even have to do
the controlling. She involved you in it.
Yeah. And she just kind of knew Tara's
done the research.
She's always, she's going to be a worry wart about
really
everything.
Smart.
And she's she would always tell me I'd send her groceries or food or whatever it was. And before I would even say, she's like, and don't worry, like Mondo is going to, like her husband, he's going to carry everything in. I'm not picking up anything. Like she just really cared so much about the pregnancy, but also putting me at ease. Which I don't know how I would have gotten through it without that.
Yeah, somehow she was able to intuit what might be a concern for you, and then she spoke to it before you even could say anything.
Yeah,
which
then
is sort of,
gives you such a sense of relief, right?
it's sort of what the seed program does, where it's telling women, you're on cycle day 6. It's going to be kind of hard today because the estrogen is at its lowest point and you're going to feel meh.
Yeah.
And so if you go in knowing that that's okay, then you'll get past meh faster in the day and then be in your day.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And you were always right with that. Like, and you did it in your seed program of the days that you would start to feel more hopeful. And I was like,
how
it
does
really
she know?
is. And I now know it. I can recognize it, just following my own cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wanted to talk about things that you created because in the context of the spirit of a mother that you were cultivating, you and Todd also created meddling.
Yes.
That documentary, I watched it 4 times. I loved it so much.
Thank you.
It was probably very important for your journey to be able to, the two of you, have control over something that you could make.
That we could do that was getting our minds off of our current day-to-day with IVF. And I literally had a miscarriage 3 days before we went on our big shoot to Canada for a month. And I was sort of recovering there. But it was restorative in a way because I don't think I would have wanted to be home. Again, it was still during the pandemic and just sitting there and kind of sitting in another miscarriage. It gave me something to, distract myself with. And I think Todd and I have some like really great memories from doing that project together.
Yeah. Well, you have a lot of great ideas. You really do. So.
But it's funny. It's just funny even thinking about this now. I remember the year before saying, I have this idea. We'll see if like we can sell it to some streamer. I remember telling you these things about my life. I mean, there's so much that happened those 5 years. And then things that came to fruition.
Yeah. So if we go back to when I read your astrological chart and I said this thing over the 4 years, I think I also said, but you're going to do other stuff.
Yeah.
And family building is going to be a part of it. But you being you, of course, is going to be, and anybody that's in the reproductive window of their life, or if this is something that they feel like is their first priority, they're going to bring 100%. But you also added these other things into your life.
Thank goodness, because it felt all consuming. So without those, it would have.
Right. But for other people, maybe making a docuseries, like that would be all consuming. So you somehow double tracked it. It was great. I want to say, knowing you and seeing you in various different things, you genuinely enjoy making people happy.
Aww.
Like if you hadn't been a skater, you would have been somehow in Disney something because you genuinely love making people smile and you put smiles on their faces.
Aww.
Do you feel comfortable talking about what you're doing here next with the podcast and with your story?
My husband and I are still doing Unexpecting, and obviously we're in a different sort of phase of life, but we're keeping the podcast mainly without talking about Georgie or parenting, and still just connecting with this community, the infertility community that we love so much. And that, over this podcast, we, so many women, couples, people reached out and just really poured their hearts out. I've never told anyone this. Oh my goodness. Like, you've opened my mind to surrogacy. And now it's been, a couple months, and there's actually crazy moments where she's like, someone's like, oh, remember when I 4 months ago listened to your podcast, thought I would never do a surrogate. We just matched with a surrogate today. There's just these really beautiful moments. And I've done a lot in my life, from figure skating and, broadcasts, but nothing has been as meaningful as this. This is like life-changing moments I'm able to experience with other people going through the same thing. So anyways, we're continuing the podcast. I'm it's in the works right now. So I don't, books take a long time, but I am going to do, it will be different than Unexpecting, because Unexpecting really was documenting, each part of the fertility journey, and my book will, and it will be mainly based on my fertility journey. But I think, as we're writing it now, a lot of it will be about life after skating and sort of the evolution of who I was becoming during these years that I was going through infertility and other things that were happening in my life, and how fertility really spurred so much to change in my life. So I think that book will be really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I'll look forward to it, because it's going to be the inner workings. Because being a celebrity, it's hard to go through this and know that you can't really tell people, because they might talk about it, and then you don't need all that extra loads and it was your really DMs.
And it was hard because while you're going through it, and I still say this on our podcast, is there's you get no medal for sharing your story. And I think that some people are in a place, and I was in that place for 5 years, where yes, it would have been great if I could have shared my story, but it wasn't right for me to share my story then. And it would have been too hard for my mental health to share that story. So I always tell people that, if you never want to share your story, and this is just something you have to deal with internally, and you have to get through it however you need to get through it. I mean, there were times where I just isolated completely and, blocked everyone out of my life to get through these moments of infertility. So yes, now I'm at this place and I'm comfortable doing this. So if it even helps one person, that's amazing, that it can open up the conversation a little bit, to make this something that people don't fear talking about. But I also, like I said, on the other hand, if you need to keep it close to your heart, then that's your journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, the flip side is talking about it too much is exhausting, and then you lose your energy, and then you're going through a retrieval and everybody's writing you, how many eggs did you get? That could be exhausting too.
I could have never done that, because I was in competitive mode, needed to focus, couldn't have given my energy to any of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's what's right for each woman.
Right.
And
it's
each
all
couple.
about timing too.
Right. And it's also Todd's involved too, for you to be going on about it, then,
And that's his life. And he really wasn't telling many people, because he was in a different, phase where he's like, everything's going to be fine. So it wasn't this big thing until it became a big thing. And then he really struggled dealing with it too, because our life was dramatically changing.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure was. Well, okay. I just wanted to quickly, because we're going to wrap up, I wanted to mention back to the seed program briefly, because you were so generous with your time, and you and I created a video that's in the Holistic Guide to Healing Endo course, where you're helping women make the decision. If you are, or your doctor are suspecting that you have endometriosis, to not be so afraid of doing a laparoscopy, that it can actually be the reset.
It really can. It can be life-changing. And I was someone who didn't have debilitating endo pain. I definitely had endo pain that, from day to day I would feel, but it wasn't something that was stopping my life. But there's so many people that it stops their life, and it is so painful. And this surgery can be so helpful and life-changing. And when it comes to fertility, I truly think it was game-changing for me. Game-changing to get that surgery, get that inflammation out.
For me too.
I mean, I went from, 4 retrievals, 1 that worked with 2 embryos that came out of it, but the other 3 were all failures, to getting a surgery. And the next retrieval, I got 6 normal embryos out of 7, and the 7th was a mosaic. So to me, there's sort of what coincidence is here?
There's a woman I worked with today. She couldn't make it past day 3. She went, she had laparoscopy. She couldn't get her embryos to be past day 3, 8-cell embryos. Today, she was in, and she has 8 fertilized that are in culture. Today is day 5. And while she was here, in the portal came the first one that's reached blastocyst. So now the other 7 are still in culture. She's never made it to that stage.
That's amazing.
So these small wins. Do you remember the conversation about the small
Small
wins
wins.
along the way?
Yes.
So for her, this is that small
Small
win
win.
moment of,
Yeah.
oh my God. And she was crying tears of joy. Like,
Yes,
wow,
because
I've
like you
got the,
finally make it and you finally have a different result. But for me, that's why I'm not afraid of endo surgery. Like I want to go back just to clean everything up now from everything I've been through. And now all of a sudden afterwards, I got an endometrioma. So that's a new thing I'm dealing with. But I I was the person that was terrified and thought I would never get this surgery. And just going through it, it's not as scary as you think. It's definitely a big surgery,
Mhm.
but it's nothing to be afraid of. And what you're dealing with day to day now is probably worse than any part
Mhm.
of the surgery or the recovery
Right. Yeah.
and the mental part, especially if you're going through fertility.
Yeah. Not knowing what's going on in there
Right. Exactly.
and then getting that
And I
information.
always feel like I've had two, and it's just like to know that inflammation is out is just like such a refreshing feeling.
Feeling. Yeah. Agreed. So the other thing I wanted to say is we also have a class called Healing After Loss, and that has strategies for women that are struggling with miscarriages or the loss of the dream.
Mhm.
And so maybe I'll talk to you. Maybe we'll put that Zoom in there,
Yeah.
because it's one thing to hear from a woman who's gone through it and she's on the other side and that it worked out. But that video that we have, you were in it right in the
Mhm.
moment.
Yes.
And so knowing that you got past it,
Mhm.
but that heartfelt conversation that we had, if it feels right, maybe I'll put
Yeah,
it in there.
definitely.
But as it is, there are some really important therapist approved strategies that help women like come back online
Yeah.
and to feel the hope again,
Yes.
or to figure out plan B.
Yes. I mean, it really is. Pregnancy loss is, that pain is so unique and devastating. And especially when you experience for the first time, it's sort of like first heartbreak where you think like, is this pain ever going to go away? Will I ever be happy again? Will I ever, recover? And you do. And of course, time
But the hormones
are
and
not
the
helping.
body, yeah. So like the way the body feels, the hormones changed as they were up high, and then
And
they
then they
crashed down.
crash down right away, especially if you're getting a DNC, which I had 4 of those. So I think that, going through it 4 times, I really like almost knew what was going to happen and what the wave of emotions were going to be like, how long everyone's so different, but I'd be like, okay, so the next 2 weeks I'm going to be really hopeless. I'm going to be really sad. I'm not going to want to do anything. And then I'm going to start to feel a little better. And I'm going to start making calls to the office again to make appointments. And then this week I'll start to feel this, and you just kind of know what to expect. But when it's new, it's really hard to understand.
Right. But the planner in you to be able to say, this is what's going to happen, and then that's going to happen,
Right.
and then that, and then I'm going to feel better and different.
Right. But I mean, I had to go through 1 or 2 of them to like have the
It's a
data
practice, the practice,
right, to know what
Right.
to expect.
Right. So as we're approaching Mother's Day, what's some information that, or like, what might you want to say to women as you've opened your heart and you went with surrogacy? Just how can we speak to women that are finding courage, or like really just trying to figure out what to do on Mother's Day?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. I had awful Mother's Days, and in 2022 it was the worst. It was my 3rd miscarriage, and it was day 5 of testing at home, which, if you're a serial tester and test at home.
Day 5 post transfer.
Right.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew. There was no squinter, no
The
line.
squinters.
I know the squinters. Right. I would send Danica. You have so many pictures of pregnancy tests on your phone from me.
Oh, yeah. From
I'm
everybody. I get them
know.
from everyone. But it was like, I'm looking, it's a thread
right.
of a difference. And
I know.
And then to remove my own wanting it so that I could try to be objective.
Right. And it was hard. And I just always remember that day, seeing, scrolling Instagram, seeing everyone's Mother's Day post, me like upstairs crying, looking at these pregnancy tests, thinking, oh my gosh, this is my 5th transfer. And third miscarriage, and, I was on retrieval number 6 and just at really such a low point. And I remember Todd and I like going to eat somewhere just to get out of the house, and I'm crying, and, you know, someone asked like, oh, like we were with our dog, and it's like, oh, like happy Mother's Day, you're a mom. And, like these things where you don't, people have no idea, but you just are like dying inside. So I know that desperation. I know that feeling of, and that's a lot of what we talk on the podcast where, it's not jealousy when you're looking at all these other women. And I think it gets so misconstrued because, and then that's why it silences women even more. And they also probably lose friendships and relationships, and people don't understand them because, when you're going through this and it's such a long haul of a drive, like you don't want to go to baby showers. You don't want to look on Instagram and have to text everyone happy Mother's Day. Like that's hard, not because you're jealous, but because you just don't know if this is going to happen for you. And you just keep thinking, when is my time? Will I ever have a time? Like maybe this just is never, like what I'm seeing may never just be a reality for me. So that's just like a hard pill to swallow. So I've definitely been there through so many Mother's Days. And then that Mother's Day was sort of just like rock bottom because I thought, this is it. Like, remember me and you were like, oh, like after all this time, like Mother's Day is going to be the day you get the positive pregnancy test. And it's like such a sweet, kismet moment. And it's just like,
it's another kick in the teeth.
Yes. I know. That's what infertility does. I mean, it just one after the other sometimes. So, but anyways, from this perspective now of being a mom, hopefully, because I don't want to be like, oh, just like it will work out. Like I hated when people said that to me. So like I can't promise you that, but there's hope and there's a solid chance that it can. And, hopefully just my story gives other people hope to keep advocating for themselves, to keep looking for answers, because people had no idea what was wrong for 5 years for me till we finally found an answer. So, I think that, it's kind of surreal to be approaching this Mother's Day.
I can only imagine. And you're reaching it because you opened your heart and you opened your mind and you went as wide as you could with, and I do see that in the treatment rooms. I see that we are being asked to be as far out from our comfort zone as we can possibly be. And that's the level of the test. Yep. So to the listeners, whatever the extent of the personal discovery, test of faith is, for each individual person, I do think that this particular health condition is going to take you to that edge. And then how do you meet it?
Right. And I think it's like, I say this too, because I think there's, some people out there that go through IVF for a while and then they genuinely don't want to do it anymore. And they, maybe their story is they are childless and a child-free life, and they have strengthened their marriage, or they've strengthened other things in their life that, they learned so much from that journey, but they don't want to go to. It's sort of how I feel about pregnancy right now. Like they've, met and reached this certain point.
Like personal peace.
Right. And, that doesn't mean that it's not a success. That doesn't mean that their journey wasn't the win. Because I think it's so hard. You see all these like success stories, or they finally got their baby. I mean, I think there's so many different versions of success. But I think that I always say, like, if you still have that, like, get up and go to do it again, and you are able to, because IVF is so freaking expensive and all of that needs to change, hopefully. And, that's a whole nother story. But I was going to say, like, if you still have that in you, go after it, like follow that instinct.
Right. I'm thinking instead of saying go for the gold, like an Olympic would say, you would be saying go for the peace.
Go for the peace. And whatever that is, for you is for you. And there's no definition of success. But I do think if you feel that urge, don't stop asking questions, don't stop looking, don't stop pushing, and I had a friend who's figured it out. She has a week-old baby, and she had went through hell, 4 years of hell, 8 retrievals and 6 transfers and all of these things and pregnancy loss, and she wanted it and kept trying to find ways financially, physically, emotionally, and she got to this point now where she's a mom. So I do think that hopefully those stories, if you have that urge, give you hope.